over again.
Good morning, everybody.
I'm on the screen. It says record Zoom.
The record button is the parent joint for the session.
Yes.
That's good.
You get 10 points. You move up in rank. Okay, do I let me just, okay. How are we going to deal with this now? Because all of this is important.
Well, I think, Sensei, that you should probably just go on with the program and recap it next time. I think we're going to learn it more that way.
Okay, we'll recap.
And I do encourage everyone to buy the book. He really does a nice job in there. I just wanted to hear him say it and talk about it.
Yeah, it's really a pretty simple concept once you get it. Anyway, okay. Third one from Thomas. What's the most important consideration when defending against chokes? Okay. Number one, relax. If you can relax, it's going to be a hell of a stressful situation. The more you can relax, the more you are in control of your body and yourself and your situation. There's also, is there anyone who does not know the difference between a choke and a strangle? Everyone knows? Okay. A choke is when your air supply is cut off. Okay, usually to the front of the neck. Okay. If a person is choking you, you have anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds before you black out due to lack of oxygen. Once a person lets go, your body will continue breathing and life will continue on. At least that's my understanding. If you really want to choke a person to death, you're going to have to keep that choke on for a while. It's not like in the movies. 10 to 20 seconds, if you can keep your cool, you can do a lot of jiu-jitsu techniques or try a lot of things. That's why I said the first thing to do is to try to relax as much as you can. Also, if you're dead weight, it's hard to hold you up if they're doing this from a standing or even a sitting position. Okay. We used to joke that Seki, if it was impossible to lift Seki off the ground, he maybe weighed 100 pounds in a wet judo gi. And he just relaxed, and you could not lift the guy off the ground. Okay, a strangle is when your blood supply is cut off. And that's usually from the side. One of the arteries going to the brain is cut off, which reduces the amount of blood that goes to the brain, and that's why you quote unquote black out. You can have anywhere from 0 to maybe several seconds before you black out, depending on how the strangulation is applied. Yes.
Okay, Sensei, this is student arguing with teacher.
That's okay.
But one of my neighbors actually belonged to, in his youth, the French Foreign Legion. And they applied these techniques until you passed out, basically. And what they taught for a strangle or a choke was just the opposite. What he taught me back when I was a kid was that instead of relaxing, you make your neck as short and as tense as possible so that your muscles are actually protecting your carotid arteries. And I've had guys who were much stronger than I am, basically on my challenge, try to strangle me, unsuccessful. I go with a weird crowd. Try to strangle me unsuccessfully, because once you do that, and it is a keep calm situation, but it's not a relaxed situation.
Okay.
You tense those specific muscles, and then they've disarmed themselves because their hands are around your throat, essentially.
Okay. I'll correct myself if I can here. I'll say keep yourself, because calmness is a mental attitude. Relaxing is, I think, a physical component.
Very good.
I'll say you need to keep your calm. You need to keep your cool. Seki, okay. Hal Brocious, whom I studied under, used the same concept that Janice mentioned. You bring your neck down and tighten it up, and get your shoulder, and it's hard for a person to choke you or do anything. The downside of that is that it restricts your upper body movement because you've tightened up all these muscles to protect your neck. Okay, that's the downside. If you leave your body relaxed, you can move all this upper stuff, but it's easier for the person to strangle or choke you. Okay, so it's kind of like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And it's something I haven't been, and Janet, thank you for bringing that approach up, because I wouldn't have mentioned that otherwise. This tightening up the neck muscle, bringing your chin down and your shoulders up, does make it much more difficult for a person to choke or strangle you. No argument. But it also makes it more difficult for you to move. You've got to maintain. This takes a lot of effort to maintain. Okay. So maybe the best resolution is have your training partner choke you while you're doing this and see how it limits techniques you might otherwise use. And then you make a decision, you know, say you make a decision, but
Sensei,
it may just be a matter of giving, you say to your students, this is your choice. You have a choice to make here. But my feeling is, my personal feeling is if you can remain calm, you've got about 10 to 20 seconds where you can do stuff and you've got full body movement to do it. I don't know if you can maintain this for 10 or 20 seconds. Janet, can you, or were you able to?
Yes, I've been told I have a very thick neck, but they meant it philosophically too.
Okay. I know you well enough to agree with that. Okay, very good. So that's it. I mean, basically, there are a lot of techniques to deal with front chokes. You can also put a person out, obviously, with nerve pressure points. I've done it a couple times accidentally to students. I've never done it on the street because I've never used that technique on the street. But I've done it a couple times accidentally to students of mine. And they're out really, you know, it's almost instantaneous. So yeah, choking, number one, remain calm. And obviously the second thing is you want to get out of the choke so you can breathe, or if it's a strangle and you're still conscious, you get out of that situation. The strangle depends what you're being strangled with. If you're being strangled with a rope or belt, you've got to go for the attacker, not the belt, not whatever is around your neck, because that's going to be a futile effort. So you've got to do something, anything to get the attacker to let go of whatever is around your neck. And I have no, you know, I don't have a specific technique for a strangle.
Sensei,
Yes, sir.
could I just jump in here for a moment? We had an experience in our dojo that really woke up a lot of students. Another black belt that assists me, Paul Haynes, in class one day helping out, and we have a young lady who is a delightful human being, but has some latent anger issues, and they were they were sparring. She put him in a choke, and the entire class was watching this little randori session. And she held him, and what happened was, and inside of about 15 seconds, he was literally snoring. We thought he was putting on an act because he was snoring fairly loudly. And finally, we went to the ground, and when he came out of it, we said, "Did you have any memory of snoring?" He says, "What do you mean?" He had no memory of that situation. And it was no longer than 20 seconds. The class was freaked out. Fortunately, he revived himself. He came to on his own. We didn't have to revive him. But point being that when you're working with chokes and strangles in class, you got to be really careful and be prepared to revive somebody if they go down for the count. And it freaked out the class that Paul was snoring that loudly and had no memory of it inside of 20 seconds.
Right, right. If I've had people that I haven't had anyone strangled out. I mean, choked out. I've had them put out due to nerve pressure. And usually if they don't come, and it's happened, if they don't come back right away, someone calls 911 because you don't know as an instructor what's going to happen next. And if they come, usually, every time they've come back, it's been maybe 20 seconds or half a minute or, but you as an instructor have an obligation to protect your student. And you want the paramedics to check this person out. And usually they'll say, you can either come with us or you should check with a physician or something like that. It's not only a professional CYA, but anyone not know what CYA means? Cover your assets. But that's the way I explained it to my high school and junior high kids. But your students will appreciate it too, because they know that if something happens to them, you're not going to, fool around and wait to see if something more serious happens. I've had students go into shock, sometimes for the most superficial injuries. Once when I taught junior high, I had a girl she got a broken blood vessel in her foot. She actually went into shock. I had to treat her for shock, and fortunately the paramedics were across the street at the fire department from the school. And the next time that happened to her, I didn't even wait for her to go into shock. I told one of my other students, get to the office, call 911. She went into shock. The paramedics came, and if a student has a propensity for certain things, then you tend to have to be more proactive about it. But that's just, there are things you can do as a sensei to help bring the person around if they're out. But if your best bet, the first thing you should do is to call 911. It's just for your protection and your students' protection. And
the strange thing in this case, Sensei, was that when he was snoring, he was just bent over. They weren't on the ground. She had him in a side headlock and cut off the blood supply, to his carotid artery. So he was leaning over, snoring, literally standing with his knees locked. He wasn't on the ground, and that's what just totally freaked us out. It's like we thought he was putting on an act.
Yeah.
We were laughing at first, and then realized, whoa. And the only way that he came out of it was once you took him to the ground and they went to a different position.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was about 5 seconds coming to.
Yeah. You have to watch your students. I mean, they will sometimes do things that you don't expect them to do, or surprisingly a choke will work or strangle will work, and then you get to deal with it. It's you have to, after the student is, after they come back, you've got to do that. Well, you're going to stay sitting down or lying down for a while. for me, it's probably about a 20-minute or half-hour process before they're allowed to get back on the mat. And it doesn't mean the class stops for that long, but I usually will assign, if it's a kid, I'll assign another adult to watch them and ask them every couple minutes, how do you feel, you know, and do you feel like they need to ask specific questions just to make sure this person is okay. Because you don't want them back on the mat and then something else happens. And it's a matter of being, on the one hand, some of you might be thinking, well, gee, he's being overcautious. And the other side of the coin is you need to be protective of your students, and you don't want anything bad to happen to this person. So anyway, what else did we on that?
Professor?
Yes.
Yeah. Choking from a grappling, a grappling continuum versus an attempted choke from, a situational, walking down the street, someone grabs you around the neck and pulls you into the alley. I mean, there's obviously, some difference in approach. One deals with just situational awareness,
Right.
so that it's not like and I think most of us probably had people come in our dojos and say, can you get out of this? And I said, well, I'm not going to start there. I'm not going to let you lock me up and then for me to attempt to strangle around there, because that's a no-win situation. I've got no ego. No, but try to come and do this. That's a little different game right here, right? So would you talk about those kind of?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you do. This is something you tend to pick up. I don't know at what belt rank you tend to do that. But it's just you tend to have an automatic response. I've done that a couple times, and I've seen students that have done that. This is, they see something coming at them and they automatically respond, and it may be simply a block. It may simply be moving out of the way, but you don't think about doing that. You just do it, and that's a hard, on one hand, it's a hard thing to get students to learn, because we tend to say in class, well, set up this technique, set up this choke, set up this strangle, and now how are you going to get out of it? We don't usually teach what do you do when someone starts to do this to you. As you're saying, the ideal is not to get into the choke or the strangle situation in the first place. But sometimes you don't see it coming, and it gets set, and then you have to deal with it. But yeah, if you can act proactively, that's the best approach. And it's something I know I don't spend that much time with how do you deal with a person who, you're walking along, someone just comes up and they grab you, or something like that. What do you do initially? We usually teach, well, what do you do after the person has grabbed you, or after they've swung at you, or it may just be a matter of, if you think someone is being argumentative, maybe taking a step back. So if they're going to do anything, they have to step forward, which gives you, maybe a fraction of a second more time. But then again, it's something that, it has to do with your visual awareness of what's going on. Yeah, but the ideal is to prevent a hold or a choke, rather than to deal with it after it's set. And someone once said to me, well, once a hold is set, what you should do is wait 2 or 3 seconds, and the person will relax a bit, because now they feel secure. I've even heard that said for a person who has a gun on you, is wait 2 or 3 seconds, because the first the logic is the first few seconds of an attack, the person who is attacking you is really apprehensive because they don't know if what they're going to do is going to work or if you're going to respond in some way. So that's a stress, you know, this is a warped way of thinking, but it's a very stressful situation for them. Once they see that they have you in a hold or lock, or they have the gun pointed at you and you have become the deer in the headlights, they tend to relax a little bit because now they feel more secure. So I don't, you know, I'm not going to say you should wait a few seconds before you do anything, but it's just, you know, a concept I've run across 2 or 3 times. Argument. And I don't know what validity there is to it. So.
One of the challenges that I've seen in teaching various shimiwaza neck and throat restraints is if one aggressor, if it's a true self-defense type situation and someone is comfortable enough that they think they can grab hold of me and choke me, they're either enraged or they're really ready to be aggressive and violent. And so my response and the way we teach the self-defense responses, that's a high level of violence if someone is trying to do something that is deadly. Where it gets tricky is if you blend in a sport element and you got grappling and the idea is someone sets in a choke and you tap out. I've never seen students who can quickly adjust between one and the other. And so I tend to say, if we're doing any sport element, let's not tie it to things that are really lethal, because I don't want to downgrade your response, because you're not tapping out if that were to happen on the street. That's not the goal of it.
No.
And so that's how that's worked out in my dojo.
Okay. That's a good approach. Okay. Is there any way, I don't know what you're seeing screen wise. Thomas, what are you seeing on your screen?
I'm set up right now with the gallery view. I see everyone equally. That's
Okay.
how I've got it set up.
Okay, so the view I'm seeing is just on my computer, correct?
Correct.
Okay, okay, I'll deal with it.
Sensei,
Yes,
I wanted to comment with reference to what Lonnie said, is that I thought that your cakewalk drill was an excellent training for exactly what he was referring to. I have no basis or experience to know whether this is a universal drill or if it is something that you invented out of the fetid depths of your own mind. So I just thought that I would bring that up in case it was not universal, because that to me very specifically targets what Lonnie said.
Can you tell me what
Definition,
cakewalk
cakewalk?
drill is?
cakewalk, right. Janet, what's a cakewalk?
It's the one where you have the all of the students except 1 or 2 standing in a row in the center facing in the same direction. The remaining 1 or 2 people are walking around in time to inaudible music, and you then say, you know, Hajime, and they grab whoever is nearest to them, either from the front or from the back, and do a technique. Because that's what Lonnie was saying of
Okay.
a sudden attack that you're maybe one of a dozen or so students standing in the middle. You don't know that you're the target yet.
Okay, yeah. It's part of the random attack training I like to have, because it's and I do it now toward the end of the class with the students lined up with, you know, one person's attacking them, but they know who the person is, unfortunately. your situation is a little more random. But you bring up a good point, is that if you want students to practice the effectiveness of their techniques or what they know, you need to put them in random attack situations. And that's the cakewalk, so to speak, is an excellent way to do it. You're not looking for exceptional execution of technique, particularly with lower ranks. But I think I've mentioned it before. This is kind of like you're trying to get them out of the deer in the headlights situation, where they just stand there dumbfounded, which is what gives the attacker the advantage. And they will even, I'll do this for students starting in maybe third or fourth week of class, and their technique response initially is absolutely crummy, but they do get better. Right? As I tell my students in class, nobody in here gets worse. The only direction is up. So yeah, thank you, Janet. That's a good addition in there. What else did I want to say with respect to random? Yeah, I think going back to the one Spanish teacher who was Basque. I guess two of my jiu-jitsu students after class were out in the locker area. They were talking about him, at least that's what he alleged. And so he came around the lockers and pushed one of them up against the lockers. And the kid came back with both hands up to the teacher and said, "Oh, you want to fight me?" Unfortunately, I was watching the whole thing. And so from a distance. And so the teacher grabs this kid by his shoulder and goes to take him up to the office, walked past me, the process. And the kid looks at me. He was a brown belt, one of my brown belts. And he looks at me and he goes with the other hand like this, going kind of like around, under, and coming up. There's an elbow lift coming along you can use for a person who grabs you on the shoulder. He does this and he looks at me and I just shook my head. And the teacher went in and explained the situation to the principal, and then the principal called me in and says, "Okay, Kirby, what really happened?" This is the guy's credibility that value. But in any case, yeah, it's sometimes you have automatic reactions. I know when I was younger, someone who was very close to me, they swung at me, and I saw out of the back of my, we didn't know for sure who it was, and I just turned and blocked, and they got really ticked off at me, and upset with me because I really blocked hard, and I apologized. I said, that's. And that's why I tell students, I said, someone taps you on the shoulder, take a step before you turn around, because that way you can see what's behind you. You don't have to react. Your reaction is to take a step, which gets you out of the immediate danger zone, and then turn around if you can. If they grab and pull you around, that's a whole different ballgame. Then if they grab you with their right hand, you come around, your both hands come up, left hand comes around an arm bar, right hand is up there to block the hit from their other hand. There are automatic reactions, and you have to train your students to, if you train them to do the techniques and put them in situations where they don't know what the attack will be, they tend to learn these, Lonnie, as you said, these preset skills, because they realize they're not supposed to stand there like an idiot. you know, if they stand there like an idiot, they're going to get hurt. Okay. Gary Whitus, who was not here this week, just,
Sensei, if you'd like, since Gary's not here, if you want to move on
yeah, let's
to Dave's
skip.
question, we can do mine another time.
Okay, we can do Gary another time because he may show up. Okay.
May I just say something to that topic? When I read Gary's question on student retention and how classes can best be conducted, that lit an absolute flame in me. Because I started teaching in '73. Teaching's what I do. And I put together a list of 12 items to share with Gary based on my 49 years of teaching experience. And I'd love to share those, but it doesn't have to be this class. And I also just send them to people and save class time.
I would love that.
Yeah, then we can talk about them next time, maybe.
Yeah, I love them.
Yeah.
That's
I
great.
would love that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I know that as well.
Okay.
And one other thing just came to mind related to this, if it's okay. I had an opportunity this week to view Darren Mellerine's knife video that was mentioned last week. And in the process, I also, which was outstanding, I recommend it to anybody. Thank you for sharing, Darren. The other thing is I had an opportunity to visit his website. And it occurred to me that Lonnie probably has a website. TJ, Janet, you might have a website. And if you do, I would love, because I can learn so much from seeing other people's websites and how they're doing what they're doing. And that's a great learning opportunity for all of us, for us to share those among each other. Darren, your website is first rate. Only one
I'm embarrassed by mine when I see Darren's.
I'm embarrassed by mine too.
His is awesome.
Thank you.
The only one I've seen better is our own Budoshin Jujitsu website. But I mean, hey, Sensei's had a few more years to do this, right?
Well, how do you say it? The first website I put up years ago, and then the software for that website was no longer being supported. And so when it got seriously hacked a couple of years ago to where it was, I could not use the old software to do any fixes because there are things I didn't know or didn't remember how to do, and there was no one available that could help me. So that's when I switched to WordPress and Elementor, and that new website took me probably about a month to set up. But I learned a lot real fast. Not all of it has stuck with me. But now I have, I've got my website provider has a backup of it. I have another outside service that does daily monitoring and backup. It also lets me know if someone has tried to put on malware, and they'll actually, part of the service is they'll take off any malware that gets into your website. I mean, I may be a little paranoid, but I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel a third time. But yeah, it's because there are people out there with evil thoughts. And anyway.
Did you find out that it was Cobra Kai that did it?
Cobra Kai? No, it wasn't. That was.
Oh, it wasn't Cobra Kai that had
yeah, it. I can't remember how it messed up my website, but it was. And I finally was able to do a final cleanup. There still is Budoshin.net floating around on various search engines, and most of that I dealt with that this week finally. And I mean, Budoshin.net is a website name that I also own, but I only use it, I don't think ever. But somehow my old website was appearing on it, but none of the links worked. And so if people looked at Budoshin, they might end up going to Budoshin.net, and nothing worked, which is not good PR. So I finally got to my website provider, and they said, "Oh, we can take care of that for you," and they did. And now almost all of them are gone. So anyway,
I don't know what's a good way for us to share websites among each other, but or email addresses, but that would be really good. I think for all of us to learn from each other.
well, most everyone, I think, if I have a page, it's called Dojo Links, and if you're Budoshin Jujitsu, you get up in one thing, and it's either a link, an email. When you click on the highlighted words, it either goes to your website or to your email address.
Okay.
And if you're not Budoshin Jujitsu, there's a second segment which has identically the same stuff. So
Right.
you might check that page, and if you are not on there, just send me the information and I'll put it on there.
Perfect.
I do tend to check it every year or so, because I do ask out of courtesy that if I put your information up, that if you have a website, that you put, you know, my email address or website on your, you know, in terms of links or stuff like that, just as a matter of professional courtesy. And I tend to go through them every year or two, and if they don't, and I contact them and they don't respond, then I take their quote unquote notation off that page. But anyway, so it's a good, you know, it also shows, you know, if you have a website and you want to do that, it also it's also an indication you feel secure enough in yourself that you're putting up information to people of other systems, other instructors, etc., who may have a different viewpoint or teach a different art, and you don't feel threatened by them. And it has nothing to do with how good this person is. It's just that you are secure enough in yourself that, and you, my thing is, you know, all of these people are good people, and I trust in them, and, you know, I believe they're legitimate, and they have integrity, and they're teaching good programs, even though they may be different martial arts. Okay, you can't put yourself in a closet, so to speak, and close the door behind you because it's dark in there. If you can't find the light switch, if there is one. Okay, last thing we want to go to then is Dave came up with a topic, sharing our own and student experiences using knowledge gained from studying jiu-jitsu in the world outside our dojo. Is on the one hand, this can be worthwhile, but I know I tell too many quote unquote war stories as examples. And so in doing this, Dave, do you want to have any constraints on this, or do you want to further explain it, or?
Well, I mean, the idea here was to share specific techniques that are actually out of our syllabus that were used in the real world successfully, or variations on a technique that's not even in our syllabus, but is very effective in the real world. What prompted this was the first two I mentioned here, the ladder ukemi and one of our students' hilarious family self-defense situations, which is just a treat of a story worth other people knowing about. The rest of this is just, we've all had students that we've taught long enough that have had to use jiu-jitsu in the real world. And so those are war stories, and they can get long and boring and elaborate, and we don't want to go there. But to say, okay, we used the EQ technique, Ubi Shimiwaza. It was used and it was followed up with a Nodo Tatake. And that got that person out of the rape situation. That can be valuable information to look up and say, okay, this is what happened. This is what was used. Without getting real carried away with the whole background story and all the rest of that. Don't need to go there.
Okay.
I would find this valuable for other people sharing it with me, which is why I thought other people might want to hear some of what our experiences are. But if people want to do that, via email or some other format, and they want to do it one-on-one, I understand completely. we can go on to the next topic.
Yours is the topic. That's topic.
Okay. Well, my bride used to kind of resent the amount of time I spent studying and teaching jiu-jitsu, and the latter ukemi was a real aha. I was out cleaning leaves out of my gutter, and I was standing on a ladder that says, "This is not a step. Do not stand here." That's the one I was standing on. I reached to put an end cap on the gutter, and when I did, the ladder shot out from underneath me, and my feet were 6 feet off the ground. I landed on the 4 inches of concrete. And when I was going down, I was aware at plenty of time because I was 6 feet in the air, and I put my body in a side fall position, lifted my head at an angle, and slapped out. And I knew that I had broken something. And even though I had pulled my head to the side, I tapped the concrete with my head. So I was aware that I just had a real close brush with a serious injury or death. That bottom line is my jiu-jitsu study felt like it saved my life that day. I told my bride, and you know what she did? She looked at me and she says, "You know what? If jiu-jitsu did that, that was worth it all." But that's pretty profound in my life. I actually had a father have a similar experience happen when he was volunteering, and he came backwards off a ladder, an extension ladder, and landed on a hill and rolled. And he says, I rolled because of my jiu-jitsu training. His family witnessed all that.
Yeah.
I had no witnesses, and I was thankful that none of my neighbors had a camera or saw it, because they would have said, "Hey, Dave, that looked really cool. Would you do that again?" And the other one I thought was really worth sharing is one of the classes I teach to 20 to 40 people is called The Art and Chaos of Self-Defense. And I had a 13-year-old teenage girl in there, one class, and her grandmother had taken the class previously. She didn't want to be there, but her grandmother made her take the class because she thought it was very valuable. After the class, this 13-year-old went on a family picnic with her extended family. But she'd only had 4.5 hours of jiu-jitsu training, okay? And that was it. And she didn't even want to be there. She was very reticent. Dad walked up behind his daughter at this picnic with the entire family, extended family viewing, and he put her in a rear headlock, a right rear headlock. And he said, "You didn't learn that much in that self-defense class this morning, did you?" And his 13-year-old daughter immediately stepped behind him, did a movement like this with her arm, put him on his rear end, and scampered away. And the entire family just belly laughed like, "Dad, you just got your rear end handed to you by your 13-year-old daughter." And yes, she did learn something in that self-defense seminar this morning. I didn't know this had happened. Grandma attended a third class. When I was teaching this technique, she interrupted the class and said, "I want to tell you what happened with my 13-year-old daughter." And that's how I learned that it happened at all. Anyways, the bottom line is we talk about training and randori and repetition and skill and all the rest of this. And as somebody who volunteers my time to teach this art form, it was very gratifying to hear that a reticent child who really didn't want to learn actually picked up something in 4.5 hours of training that they could use that effectively, that quickly. So I'm here to say jiu-jitsu works. No questions asked.
One thing I have found, because I've having taught jiu-jitsu at junior high level, 140 kids a day, 5 days a week. And several of them did get into street situations where they had to use jiu-jitsu. And there are two things worth mentioning from that, because they'd come back to me after it happened, and or actually three things. Number one, if you have a student who does go through something like that, you need to sit down and listen to them. Okay, that is so important. That is so important to them. And then once they're done, let them know they're okay. Because in every situation where the kid told me about what happened, they were sufficiently upset because they thought they were going to get into trouble. Okay, so you got to sit down, listen to them, reassure them they're okay, they didn't do anything wrong, they did the right thing. Second thing is, they tend to feel bad about hurting the other person, because they didn't realize that until they used whatever technique that they used, that technique would actually injure another person. It was kind of a reality check for them. And it's kind of like there's a certain, how do you say, they reach a certain maturity or awareness out of the situation of the power they have or the potential that they have. And that needs to be reassured, and they're okay, etc. The third thing is, in every situation, they used really simple techniques. A block, which broke an arm, a hand throw, basic hand throw for a knife attack, which broke a wrist, a foot stomp for a rear bear hug, which broke a foot. They used really simple stuff that they had been practicing on for, some kids had been in my class for 2 years. Some kids I had for 2 hours, plus they came back a third hour to be a quote unquote TA. Some of the upper belts, I had a couple kids from the high school who came back as TAs. They got high school credit for it. But you have to be open to this. If you have a student who's been in a street situation, they need someone to talk to. And if they come to you and say, this is what happened, you need to take the time and listen to what happened. Just so they feel they can get it off their chest, so to speak, and feel reassured. I haven't had, that I know of, any adults that have been in street, well, other than law enforcement personnel. That's a different ballgame. But I haven't had any adults come back to me and where they've had to use it.
Professor, may I share one scenario where that happened with an adult in my teaching?
Yeah.
So I teach martial arts in the context of the churches that I pastor, mostly. And so I was pastoring a church in Arkansas. This has been about 10 years ago. And we had class that met twice a week. And one of my students was the director of psychiatric services for the Department of Corrections in Arkansas. And excellent student, had background in other arts, very respectful in class. And so when we were warming up one night, I'm noticing he's especially chatty, like couldn't keep himself composed, and he keeps talking to another one of my senior students. And he was picking up that I was starting to get irritated that he was breaking etiquette. And he finally said, Sensei, can I stop? I just need to tell you this. And so I said, sure. Dr. Edwards was his name. I said, sure, Dr. Edwards, what's going on? And he said, well, that drill that we were working 2 nights ago, and it was based on a 2-hand front grab and a push-pull spin into a shimiwaza. He said that we just kept going over and over again. He said, that really works. And I said, well, right, I agree with that. He said, no, you don't understand. He said, it saved my life today. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I was in with an inmate having a psych eval. And he said, I'm in a closed off room. It's glass around us and the guards are outside. The correctional officers are outside. And he said, the inmate leans in, and as he does, he pulls up a shank. And he said, he has it 6 to 8 inches from my face. And he said, I had drilled that so many times that I instinctively reached up, pulled, reached over the table. He said, I've got him in a chokehold, and I grabbed that arm. And he said, and by the time I did that and secured him, the guards were in and they took him down. There was a total quiet over the class we're looking at him. And I'm thinking, man, am I glad we drilled that 2 nights ago. But he was a firm believer in the power of simple repetition, using that particular technique. And it completely changed the feel in that class, because all of a sudden we're saying, this is a very credible and reputable person saying, I just did this in a prison setting and it saved my life. So that was one of the times I was so grateful to be a teacher.
Yeah, it's those, I say, on the one hand, it's nice to see kids that you feel, or students that you feel have a lot of potential, get it. I mean, they progress belt-wise or whatever you want to call it. But it's also very gratifying if, unfortunately, the student is in a street situation and they come back and say, guess what? It worked. Because that makes, how do you say, saving one life makes all the effort very satisfying and very rewarding. And if other students are there, it changes their perspective as well. And there's nothing that beats that. I mean,
That's right.
You as an instructor can talk until hell freezes over about how well a technique works.
Mm-hmm.
But if a student comes back and says, guess what? It does work.
Yeah.
You can't beat that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And it's not that we should look for those situations, but when they happen, they're invaluable. Okay. Let's see what else. That's it. We skipped step 4. Just to review from the beginning, and I'll take a few minutes on this. The first question was testing process questions. I believe Jonathan had a question on the process itself, and I said what do you call it? The pre-mat test, the terminology is because I want my students to know the terminology of the art so that when they become instructors, they know what they're talking about and they can use the appropriate terminology. And if students ask questions, they can answer their questions as best as possible. On the kata portion of the test, the technique is called out in English and Japanese, and they just do the technique, the specific technique. I'm not looking for perfection. Lower ranks, I'm looking at particular parts of the technique to see that those elements are in place, because if those elements are in place, the rest of the technique will work properly as they get better. On the waza portion, which is technique, an attack is called out. They can do whatever technique they have learned. It can be off the same belt, it can be out of the kata portion, it can be from a previous belt, it can be from a technique elsewhere in jiu-jitsu that maybe is out of alignment with techniques, the lower rank techniques that they've learned. That's okay. This is the more personalized part of the testing, and I will add that if a student does well on the kata portion of the test, the waza portion is usually a no-brainer for them, because they've got the kata portion is the hard part. On the brown and black belt level, the student is expected to know all the techniques, all the potential techniques, or kata in Japanese, because I will then, or on the test, 5 to 10 kata techniques will be called out, and the student has to be able to do those immediately. Waza portion, the same thing. Waza portion again, if they do well on the kata portion, the waza portion is basically a no-brainer. Because by brown or black belt, the student has such a depth of knowledge. It's usually if a student does really well on the kata, I'll just kind of take a glancing look at the waza and say this person's okay. And I know that's a judgmental thing, but you can only beat a cake. You can only beat cake batter so much. It doesn't get any better after that. So, bad analogy. My sensei never tested people for rank anyway, which I couldn't get away with once I started teaching it in a public school. They had to have growth criteria and all that other stuff, and that's what caused the belt rank exams to come into play. But the traditional way is sensei looks at you for a while and sees how you're doing. He says, "Oh, you're green belt, you're purple belt, you're blue belt, you're brown belt. Oh, Joji, you black belt." Oh, you know, and they just. But he was pretty accurate, you know, so you can't say, you know, that he had whatever criteria he had, and he was, you know, he's pretty consistent on it. And that's what counts, you know. But anyway, the parent-child joint relationship and their importance and techniques. The parent joints, and this comes from physiology, and I didn't realize this until about 10, 15 years ago, and it's changed the way I teach techniques, or I verbalize my explanation, so to speak. Parent joints are those joints that are connected to your torso, your shoulder joints, your hip joints, not actually your neck joint, but the joint that's at the tip. There's a joint at the base of your skull, and I forget the name of that particular joint. And if you control the head movement or any of the other parent joints, you control the person's torso, and you can control in which direction they can go. And you use your technique to either cause that to happen or to work from that situation where the person's body is going in a certain direction. Just to add on, for example, if you come in for a hit, I mean, a person comes in, they swing at you, you block, and you do a strike to their solar plexus and they bend forward, then ideally you want to help this person go forward rather than making them go backwards. How do you say, for lack of a better phrase, and Seki would say, you always help the person go in the direction they want to go, rather than fighting them. And if you look at techniques that way, I initially, when I started teaching, it was to do a wrist throw. You bend the wrist and you turn it outward, and you pivot your left foot back and turn to the left, and the person will take the throw, or they'll be thrown. But if you take your hand and do this to yourself, if you lock up your wrist, you'll notice that if you continue that lock, it'll lock up the elbow, and then it'll lock the shoulder. And that's a child-parent joint relationship. Once you lock the shoulder, then the throw, success is inevitable. Or as the board would say, resistance is futile. Anyway, so that's basically it with the child-parent joint relationship. So did I cover that okay?
Yes.
Fewer words? Okay, and if someone's confused, we can continue it again next time. Okay, next time we have the Gary Whitus's topics, student retention and how to run classes to hopefully improve student retention. And I would still like to learn from that, because when I started the program with Santa Clarita Parks, they said, what's your student retention rate? And I said, 20%. And they looked at me kind of weird. And I said, that's about norm for martial arts programs. About 80% of the students will drop out in the first few weeks. But the ones that stick around really stick around. And you end up with a class, ideally, where if the older students will register first because they want to make sure they've got a spot, and there may or may not be room for newer students. And that's the ideal situation. It doesn't happen too often. Although we'd all love to have that situation. Anyway, so we'll deal with that on the 20th. And if you have any other topics that you'd like to see added, let me know. And I promise this time I will come up with a better title for episode 11. No tensive remarks, which I was in a stupid mood when I did that Star Wars setup 2 weeks ago. So
I enjoy all the openings. They're a blast.
I think it's great too.
I
Don't
always
stop
put my
being
head back
you.
and laugh and go, okay, Sensei's at it again.
well, you gotta, how do you say, you gotta have fun with stuff, because
That's right.
Absolutely. And you're really good at it.
I mean, if you're how do you say, if you're serious all the time, I know it as a classroom teacher. We used to have a teacher across the hall from me. When he lectured, you could hear him throughout the building. This guy had a phenomenal voice. And when one of his best lectures was on the Confederate Air Force. And but he would, which I eventually picked up the skill for history, and my students would actually catch me, is that if you find you're bored, I mean, he would make up history as he'd go along, just to see how far he could go off the track before his students realized he was, for lack of a better phrase, feeding him a bunch of bull. I would do economics or government lectures because those can be really boring topics, and I could get bored too. And I would switch either to rap or rhyme. And the kids would complain because they couldn't take notes, even though I had a lecture outline up on the overhead. But teachers do weird things when they're bored. And the trick is, I mean, you may have had some teachers that did weird stuff, but it helps keep us sane. And you gotta have, how do you say, there are times when you have to have fun with your students. You have to be able to joke with them, because that's part of building the relationship with them. And you get to know them and they get to know you a little better. Because you can't go out for a drink afterwards with them, because that will destroy your image. Anyway. He's great in class, but he's better after he's had a few. Anyway.
That's when we learn the secret techniques.
That's when we learn the secret technique. Oh well. Anyway, I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And I don't know what the weather is like everywhere else.
Snow.
Who has snow?
We're gonna get snow here in Arlington tonight.
In the 20s in Southern Illinois, it's nice and cold here.
Yeah, I heard in the news that the concern now isn't as much that it's cold, but it's been cold for so long. And that's beginning to wear on people. And I could, you know, I guess I could see it. We get tired here in Santa Clarita occasionally when it's, you know, God, it's over 105 again today. You know, my wife calls it hair dryer weather, but we'll get a couple weeks where it is just, you do not want to go outside. I mean, you can fry dinner on the sidewalks. But anyway, so, and then there's Florida. We're not going to pick on Dave. Anyway.
Yeah. Thanks for not going there. There's a lot to pick on.
Anyway, so I want you to have a great week. And let's see. Darren, I know many years ago I was at Jack Garrett had me down for a seminar, and the parents had a phenomenal lunch afterwards with crayfish. I still have not developed the taste for crayfish. But what's really funny is they made this fantastic bread pudding, I guess it is. The sauce was absolutely phenomenal. They had these big foil containers, and when everyone was done, they had 2 foil containers that were left unopened. And one of the mothers said, "Why don't you take this with you on the plane?" This was before they had all the checking requirements and stuff you couldn't bring on board. And I said, if I take it with me on the plane, I won't have anything when I get off. I didn't take it, but anyway, it was if and when you see Jack, tell him the food was absolutely fantastic.
Hard to beat the food from New Orleans, Sensei.
It's great. You know, it's California has a lot of variety, but if you can go to different countries and different places, you find out what the local food really tastes like, and it's usually fantastic. So anyway, I will stop at this point because otherwise I'll go on and tell more and more stories. Anyway, have a great weekend. Don't do anything too dangerous, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Very good.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
If anyone has a title for this week, right away. Take care.
Bye-bye.